Do you want a new sound for your chord progressions? Look no further than the dominant 11th chord. You just heard a C dominant 11th chord. Dominant 11th chords are written in notation with the number 11 after the chord letter. You may also see them referred to as simply 11th chords. There are several types of 11th chords that you may have heard of. This can cause confusion, but just know that the dominant 11th is only one of these chords. Now you might be wondering, how do I construct the dominant 11th chords? Dominant 11th chords have 6 notes: 1st, 3rd, 5th, flat or minor 7th, 9th, and 11th. These numbers show the notes that make up the dominant 11th chord. They are also referring to the intervals that are within the dominant 11th chord. It is like a formula or recipe that you can apply to generate dominant 11th chords. Let's look at an example to clarify this. The C major scale has the following notes: C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. The first note is C, third note is E, and fifth note is G. These notes create a C major chord. The seventh note is B. If you drop this note by a half step or semitone, then you get B flat. Add this flat or minor seventh note to the C major chord, and you have a C dominant 7th chord. You may be wondering how you get to 9th and 11th notes if the major scale only has 7 notes. If I continue the scale after the 7th note B, then the notes simply repeat again. This second set of notes is an octave higher than the first set of notes. So if I assign a number to each note, you can see that although the letters repeat, the numbers continue to rise to indicate this higher pitch. I can now pick up where I left off with the C dominant 7th chord. The 9th note is D. You will see that this is the same as the second note, but it is an octave higher, so we add 7 and it becomes 9. If you add the 9th note D to the C dominant 7th chord, then you have a C dominant 9th chord. The 11th note is F. This is the same as the 4th note. If you add this to the C dominant 9th chord, then you get the C dominant 11th chord. I appreciate this has been a bit long-winded, but now you can construct any dominant 11th chord that you like. You also understand that the dominant 11th chord contains 6 notes that are also in the major, dominant 7th and dominant 9th chords. Dominant chords feature as the 5 chord in major and minor key songs. They create a tension and expectancy that is resolved when the next chord is the tonic 1 chord. This is because the notes in a dominant chord are close enough to the 1 chord notes that they really pull the listener's ear towards the tonic chord. Dominant 7th chords also contain a tritone interval within them, which has an unstable sound that wants to resolve. If you use the dominant 11th chord diatonically as the 5 chord, then its 11th note will be the root note of the 1 tonic chord. This weakens the tension somewhat within the chord and almost anticipates the resolution that will happen when the 1 chord is played. This mellower nature brings a new dimension to the dominant chord, so experiment with dominant 11ths in your own progressions and see what you think. I'll show you some examples now using HookPad. There are links in the description if you want to get HookPad and follow along or to learn more. Examples will be in the key of C major. In this example, I'll use the dominant 11th chord in the most traditional position as the 5 chord at the end of a progression after the 4 chord and before the 1 chord plays again on repeat. Please note that the dominant 11th chord is written as a slash chord in HookPad. In the first 4 bars, I'll use the standard 5 chord triad. In the second 4 bars, the final chord will be the dominant 11th. Listen to the difference that this brings. Next up, I'll show you the 5 dominant 11th on its own at the end of a progression. Listen to how playing a chord other than 4 before the 5 chord provides less of a build-up and more surprise when the dominant chord is heard. When creating longer song sections, you can simply combine ideas. In the next progression, I'll take the first two examples and put them together. On the second repeat, I'll use the dominant 11th again, and also change the minor chords to minor 11ths. Listen to how combining 11th chord types adds a relaxed mood to the progression. Repeating song sections in your own songwriting can be made more interesting by altering chord types in a similar way. You don't have to make every 5 chord a dominant 11th. I've shown you the comparison with standard triads. You can also use dominant 7th and dominant 9th chords as the 5 chord. In this next example, I'll use 2 different dominant chords on the same bar for comparison, but you could spread them throughout your song as well. As I showed you earlier, the 11th note in the major scale is the same as the 4th note. sus4 chords use this 4th note. If you play the 5 chord as a sus4, it can provide an interesting lead in to the 5 dominant 11th, providing a preview of the 11th/4th note. In this next example, I will also use the first inversion 1 chord and start on the 4 chord for an alternative type of progression. Another interesting place to use dominant 11th chords is as secondary dominants. A secondary dominant chord has a dominant relationship to a chord that isn't the tonic or 1 chord of the current key. Check out our video to learn more about this. I'll show you this in action now. In the first 4 bars you'll hear the standard triads. I've used the secondary dominant of the 5 chord, known as the 5 of 5, to lead the listener to the 5 chord. Listen to how this draws the ear to the 5 chord. In the second half, I use dominant 11th chords on both the secondary dominant and the dominant chord. Hear how this changes the progression. In this next example, I will use the secondary dominant of the 6 chord. This will be the only dominant chord this time. Listen to how not using a standard 5 chord changes the feel of the progression. dominant 11th chord is only one of many chord extensions. Click the playlist on screen now to uncover a world of new chords.